Welcome, everyone. I'm Tom DeCord. I'm excited to be joined by Ben Altschuler, who's CEO and co-founder of Speakology AI. Speakology AI is a fascinating development in the field of AI tutoring and conversation practice because of its hyper realism. All right, without further ado, Ben. So how did you get into this? I know from your background you were a researcher. You've done research at Emory, at Tufts. You were an intern in USC there, that where virtual languages was part, but not always center of your research focus. So tell us a little bit how Speakology AI came as a vision and as a reality.
Well, yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Since I was a little kid, I always loved languages so much. And I guess my studies kind of took me towards computer vision. So I was in a lab at USC and we were building these holograms basically. So the idea was you'd walk into a museum, there would be this kind of like hologram pinned to the wall and you could interact with it. And before we were working with, it was astronauts and Holocaust survivors with the two use cases. And I was thinking it would be so cool if you could talk to these different avatars or holograms and you could try speaking Spanish or Chinese or French and have this conversation. And this was maybe about 4 years before the big AI boom happened and ChatGPT came out. And once that boom came, that was the final piece that we needed to make this have this kind of generative engine that would allow for these interactive conversations. So I've always loved languages. My research kind of took me in this direction, and it's been a nice marriage of these two fields.
And that's what struck me. I mean, I've been studying Italian off and on using Speakology AI, and you're interacting with what appears to be a human. Looks like a human, talks, interacts like a human. I mean, there are indications like, okay, there's AI generation here, but it seems to change the relationship to a certain degree, kind of heightens a little bit the humanness around the AI tutoring. I'm thinking now might be the moment we show people what we're talking about specifically in with this conversation practice and this AI generated realism.
So I have a French course queued, and what we can do is we can look at a travel activity that we have. So this is one, I believe one of the teachers at a school in Florida made this, and I will select an avatar. Okay, so here is one of the AI.
Salut Benz, moi, j'adore voyager à Tahiti avec ma famille. À Tahiti, il y a la plage, le soleil et la mer. C'est très beau. Est-ce que tu aimes aller à la plage?
So this is LOD, one of our AI personas, AI conversation partners. And we're having this conversation really structured around this advertisement to visit Tahiti in French. And you'll see that she can have this dynamic back and forth.
C'est incroyable. Je viens de Québec, j'aimerais parler français. So it's like
Oui, c'est incroyable. Alors dis-moi,
I
est-ce
want
que
to.
toi, tu veux voyager à Tahiti un jour?
Oui, j'aimerais le faire tout de suite.
I don't know if she can hear you perfectly through the mic, but um, I'll see.
I know
I'll
it's
try
my
to.
my Quebec roots, you know. I don't want to lose my French and try to
Yeah,
practice
there you
as
go.
well. But it's fascinating. So tell us more about the structure. I mean, obviously, I'm looking at what appears to be a human being who is my partner, conversation partner, is my tutor, but is not my teacher per se, right? This is more of an assistant. So tell us that relationship between actual human teacher, the student, and the AI assistant. How's that relationship structured formally?
It's a great question, and it's one that I think really is kind of driving the field and has been kind of striking a lot of anxiety with educators, but also a lot of opportunity here too. So our perspective is that the human educator is always the one driving the car. So you can pick your topics, your proficiency level. You can use Actful, you can use Weta, whatever scaffolding system you'd like, you can put that in. You can pick the can-do statements, vocab. If you're using language structures, you can put those in too. You can decide the style or the structure, the way that the AI should correct students and the way that the AI should deliver feedback. So there's all these different elements that create this interactive conversation. And they really, the human educator is picking the pedagogy behind it. The AI is just kind of executing this interactive conversation piece.
Right. And then you can have standards-based aligned activities as well, right? You can have oral exams. You have a grade book. I was looking at the grade book, and so you have a scale based on these different criteria. Can you give us a kind of a further sense of the evaluation capacities here?
Yeah, we have a couple different strategies. So the first one that we have is we look at ACTFL's interpersonal speaking performance descriptors rubric, quote unquote. So there's 7 different AI models that look at the conversation and it judges the students in these subcategories. So for example, it can say, okay, Tom, your Italian's great. In the communication structure, you're at an intermediate high. But in the cultural competence category, you are a novice high. And it kind of aggregates this score and can assign a proficiency level. And essentially that boils down to a grade that the teacher can opt to use or you don't have to use. And you can track the student's performance over time too.
So there, you have people like me, individuals, but I think your biggest client base are probably university professors and school districts who want to use your program. Can you tell us what kind of feedback you get from instructors, schools, universities? In other words, how best they're leveraging Speakology AI, or where it's making the greatest impact with students?
Absolutely. I think the most notable and really concrete data that we've received back has been with the University of Wisconsin.
Mhm.
So there's a really cool program there called the Collaborative Language Program. It's ran by someone named Lauren Rosen. And so their whole department, I think they have about 7 languages that are using Speakology. And they were one of the early adopters of our platform. So at the first ACTFL conference, I met Lauren and she was like, all over it, let's try it. And we tried it and launched a little study, like a case study. So they found that students in their French 1 class, they would use it every week, at least once a week or twice a week, just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes in assignment. And that the students in their level 1 classes, so they started with French, that they scored higher than the students in French 2 on the Avant proficiency test. So French 1 used Speakology, French 2 didn't use Speakology, and in the speaking category of Avant, the French 1 students scored higher than level 2. So that
Wow.
was our first kind of real study we've done. It's been very interesting.
Sure. You talk to language teachers and they say, if you want to speak a new language, speak the language. But that seems to be the greatest barrier for most. One is, of course, feeling self-conscious or insecure, speaking with a human being or in a group situation with people, or maybe not having access to someone who speaks that language. So here you have 24/7 access. You don't have the pressure that comes with being in a live situation with human beings where you're afraid of perhaps sounding silly or just making a mistake. So that's now to the side. And also you have a human component because you have the realism involved here. So you feel like you forget, you feel like you're talking to a human being. Um, but you go beyond that, right? Because you have programs that involve reading comprehension. You have some AI writing assistants as well, as I saw on the website. So how are the clients responding to broadening the language objectives or language activities, or you still stay very highly concentrated around speaking?
We still think that AI is most valuable in this interpersonal speaking area. So our biggest product and I guess claim to fame is this interactive avatar or interactive AI persona. But we heard that the feedback piece, so just teachers, rather than having to sit down and grade, hours and hours and hours of audio or video recordings from students, that the AI can give feedback right away and can help assign, this grade. We had so much good feedback for that we wanted to expand that to different activities. So same thing for writing or for reading comprehension. The AI can jump in and help with feedback and scoring and giving really personalized data back to the student.
So is it a system whereby the teacher will instruct the AI on essentially how to respond and provide maybe a rubric or at least criteria that will help instruct the AI to provide effective feedback and effective grading?
Exactly. Our newest feature is the reading comprehension one. And this one, you can upload an article or paste a passage in. The student reads it and then discusses with the AI. And the teacher can tell the AI, okay, I want you to focus on these things. I want you to evaluate based on this. And at the end, they get feedback based on their reading comprehension, which is interesting because they speak about it with the AI in the call. So we kind of incorporate these different modes of communication here.
Oh, that's fantastic. Listen, I want to kind of broaden the conversation a little bit now because, as I mentioned at the outset, there's some exciting developments. Hyperrealism is instantly recognizable. It's one of the more visible changes, but there are changes going on in the internal learning architecture as well. I'm thinking of a study out of Taiwan recently that involved 10 high schools where there were essentially two segments, two control groups, one with traditional human instruction and teaching, and the other with AI. And the focus was learning Python, learning coding. And the students in the group of AI instruction actually learned at the equivalent of 6 to 9 months faster. And I was like, oh my God, how is that? How is that possible? And I was sort of looking at the report and some feedback on it. And they changed the internal architecture so that it could better understand how the student learns, not simply if they got something right or wrong. Like we do Duolingo, okay? Duolingo has a bird brain AI system, which basically, if you get it wrong, then you get this answer. If you get it, this question, this next question, or next activity, and if you get it right, you get that activity. But in the study in Taiwan, they were focused on learning reinforcement and better understanding how the student was learning. And yet, on the other hand, we have Conmigo, which arrived to much fanfare a couple of years ago. And Sal Khan, the founder, said recently in an interview that it hasn't had the impact that he anticipated, and students haven't really connected with this type of AI tutoring system. Google, just to finish this thought, so Google DeepMind, the lead of Google DeepMind in AI in education. I think it's Irina Jurinka, if I pronounced it correctly. She said, look, we think that AI tutoring is where we can have the greatest impact in education. And they were hinting at future audio and video interactions. So there's a lot going on, but seems somewhat contradictory. What's your sense of the state of AI tutoring and technologies, and where do you think we're headed, and where might Speakology be headed?
I think it really will happen in stages. I mean, first of all, these use cases are really fascinating. I remember I learned about the Taiwan study from your newsletter, so I'm a
Oh,
fan, and
okay.
I was fascinated by that. Um, but I think that there's a lot to say about the intention and the style of how you implement AI. So my perspective is that AI will start as really this teacher driven, and when I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about AI in language education.
Mhm.
So I
Right.
think that it will begin as this teacher backed activity. So again, I would say our teachers use it maybe Speakology 15 minutes a week, some cases even more, maybe 30, 45 minutes a week. And really just boosting that personalization and differentiation, with this avatar. I could picture a world where this relatively quickly evolves into a Phil style program. So you have a facilitator in the room, the students are interacting with AIs and the facilitator is kind of overseeing the class, looking at feedback one-on-one with the student, designing different activities with the student and the AI. And teachers could evolve more into this facilitator or this management style role, managing different AIs. But I still believe that this is further away than people think, maybe time-wise. I'm not
Right.
quite sure. And I think that when you move to different content areas, it becomes even more complicated. I think that there's more variables that come into play. Language learning is such a nice use of AI, and it's just so direct that I think it's an easier path for adoption.
Well, what strikes me is that we can personalize learning to a degree
Right.
that was just not possible. So if you're, say, a Spanish teacher, you have 25 students, they may all technically be in a B1 level class, but there can be wide disparities even within a single CEFR level. So how do you address those disparities? What do you do about the students who are shyer about speaking, getting them involved? Obviously, I mean, I'm thinking right now about stations, how you can have students in stations so they can be participating in speaking activities via Speakology, where it's aligned with where they are and where they need to go at this moment. And are you sort of seeing that Speakology is being leveraged as a very personalized tutor by teachers? Are they thinking very specifically about how to personalize the learning for their students?
100%. And in the core of our model, of our AI model, it's designed so that it can identify the student's level and then continue to push them. And if there's a student that's struggling, it can scale down. If there's a student that's at an intermediate high and they're in a class that's at novice high, it can recognize that and then push to their level. And I think that the other element too is that when students have their own unique interests, the AI can hone in on this. So if we have a lesson that's about like visiting Tahiti, like the one that I showed earlier,
Right.
and one student happens to be really into shelling on the beach, or one student happens to be really into exploring the rainforest, the AI can kind of pivot that conversation in that direction while still achieving whatever standards that the teacher wants them to achieve.
Right. Now, tell me, you mentioned the topics, right? So, Speakology provides topics, but teachers can edit topics. They can insert their own topics. And then there are courses. So how does a teacher go about structuring a course with Speakology? Let's say I'm that French B1 teacher. How do I go about structuring a course and determining topics and things of that nature? Can you walk us through a little bit of that process?
Yes, we have a variety of template courses that you can pick from. So you can select your French 1 course, you add it, it comes pre-built with maybe 40 different topics in it. And then from there, you can really customize. You can add different topics, you can modify existing ones. Um, you can also set the starting and then target proficiency levels. So if you have like a kind of rough idea of where most students are starting in a rough area of where you want most of them to finish, this also can help the AI know, okay, by midway through this course, if the students aren't here, I better be ramping up and pushing them to get higher up here.
Okay. So we always have the human touch. We always have the human oversight and the
Right.
human control as well. And yet, we're able to leverage AI to provide this kind of conversational practice that the teacher doesn't have the time and doesn't have the facility to um, provide that. Talk to me about a little bit more in detail about some of the assessment mentioned earlier, oral exams, and how are teachers leveraging Speakology AI for oral exams, or other types of maybe formal oral assessments?
I think that the concept is even when I was in school, I remember, we would have an oral exam in both high school and university, actually, in both situations. We would either have to meet outside of class and schedule a time, or we would go one by one into the hall, do an oral exam, and then come back in. And it would take like a week to get through the whole class. And then on top of that, it would take maybe another week just to get feedback. And by then you kind of forget how the exam went, and the feedback
Right.
is, I don't even know how much value you get out of it at that point. So the idea is that AI can do this for you at scale. So it can really administer this assessment right away. So you can program in exactly what questions you'd like. The AI can ask them verbatim for each student. You can program in the rubric or whatever evaluation criteria that you have. The AI can evaluate the student, and then right after they finish, it can give feedback.
So one issue that sort of pops into my mind is equity, right? So you have a situation perhaps where the technology is available at the school, and so the teacher, the instructor is providing an infrastructure, maybe providing laptops. The school perhaps has a laptop card, perhaps it's a one-to-one environment with the devices provided by the school. But I'm assuming that the teachers, instructors want the students to practice on their own and practice at home, but they may not have access to the technology. So how are the teachers, instructors, the schools, universities, how are they tackling this issue of trying to be equitable in the distribution of this particular platform to students?
It's a great question. I would say some schools would use Speakology in the classroom. So you can think of it as like a bell ringer on Fridays. So every Friday morning for 5 minutes we'll go, or 10 minutes we'll go on and have a Speakology activity. And I think that's the best solution for this. I think that there's really isn't like the perfect solution.
Right.
Um, we try to design the platform so that it works well on really any device, but still, I mean, there's a great question about access. What happens if students don't have access to the devices outside of the classroom? And I think that that's still a really good question about AI, and a goal that as AI companies and also as educators, how do we solve this very important issue?
So what are the schools, universities, educators telling you about what features or what improvements that they would like to see in Speakology or just in AI tutoring, conversational practice in general?
We've had some interesting ideas about adding multiple students into a video call. So we could have
Ah,
one AI as the person kind of they're bouncing ideas off of, and then multiple students or two students in a call. And I'm so curious. We're still working on it now, but I just want to do a beta test and see like what the dialogue would be like, or what that exchange would be like. Because you could almost have like two students talking. The AI is moderating the conversation. You could have two students interviewing the AI. You could have the AI interviewing students. You could have them debating. It just kind of opens the door for some new, very interesting exchanges. But we get feedback all the time. There's a lot of these really creative ideas that I think are still churning, and people are brainstorming here.
now you mentioned that the application of AI to language is very direct, and I see that as well. I see one of the more sort of concrete areas where AI can really enhance the learning process, specifically in speaking a new language. But I'm wondering if you're thinking about delving into other topics. You've mentioned earlier some have complications that may provide some obstacles, may make it difficult. But are you sort of thinking of broadening into other disciplines, other subjects?
We have up to an extent. So we've done some career fair prep, we've done college interview prep, job readiness. So really just getting students ready to have some sort of an interaction, with a human realistic person. And I think that the career readiness or just tech literacy has been a really interesting area. We've also dipped into social studies. So we've
Mhm.
had a few history classes using Speakology. And it's really interesting. There's a lot of, the platform that we made allows for creativity. And I think I'm always surprised when I log in and I see, oh, look, this is a great new example of how to use the platform. So I can imagine expanding into some other disciplines, but I think we are we're really still just evaluating where we can make the most impact.
Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. You mentioned sort of workplace readiness, right? Going through interview process, simulating these different activities and steps along the way to entering the workforce. As a former social studies teacher, I'm intrigued by your mention of social studies. How were the teachers integrating Speakology in social studies classroom?
Well, I think what was it? We had one really good use case.
Was it kind of like as a historical character, or was it something along those lines?
Yeah, we had a few historical character ones. We had ones that were like, imagine you're time traveling with me, and we're going to discuss, this specific thing that occurred in history. I think the other element that's been really beneficial is you can upload graphs and different resources and maps and have a discussion based on what you see here. So I think that, in the language world, you can have that discussion based on an authentic resource. And in social studies, it's kind of a similar idea where you can have whether it's the AI acting as a peer rather than like a tutor or a coach, and just talking with the student about what they can see in this visualization.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, hey, I'm sure people are thinking, well, what does this cost? And I know you have pricing listed. So if you could tell us briefly pricing, and then maybe an area that I haven't asked you about, we haven't delved in, and you want to make sure that people know.
Definitely. Well, yeah, I guess to start on pricing, so for schools and universities, we charge $32 per student per academic year.
Mhm.
Of course, whenever we work with larger districts, we always, consider every option we can to help support the school. Um, and yeah, I think that for other areas that we haven't delved into, there's quite a few. Um, I guess I had a question for you too. I was curious.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
you've seen all of these different tools. You've been in the industry and watching the tech evolve for a long time.
I'm old,
Are
yes.
there, yes, no, no. My question for you is, I mean, do you think that there's a certain area that AI companies misunderstand about how students actually learn languages or gain communication skills? Do you think that there is still this barrier between AI companies and the classroom?
Well, I think there are barriers, there are gaps in understanding, not so much in the language realm. In fact, that what comes to my mind is that language teachers often are not leveraging tools that have direct benefits in learning a new language. And so I guess, one of the fundamental reasons we're talking is because I want to help educators become aware of how AI can be used purposely, effectively, productively, and also ethically to help students. And we both agree that in the realm of learning a new language and speaking, AI has measurable benefits. So it's more for me of getting the word out about not only tools, but how they could be leveraged effectively, but while always keeping the human at the center of the instruction. So as we talked about Speakology as an assistant to the teacher, and the teacher is overseeing and is firmly in charge. I think what's difficult by and large for ed tech companies, those who haven't taught, is to really grasp how complicated teaching and learning is and how many different variables affect teaching and learning. When I was teaching, it seemed as if I was making 100 different decisions every 40-minute class. And I don't know sometimes if ed tech companies really understand the complexity and the fluidity of what's happening in that human to student interaction and student to student interaction. It's highly complex. If it wasn't complex, we'd all master how to teach effectively. And so it's something that can be underestimated or maybe undercalculated when it comes into this design of different tools. But like I say at the beginning, I think an issue often is teachers, even if they're interested in leveraging AI and they can theoretically or abstractly understand that there are benefits, they need more practical guidance. And that's a big reason why we're chatting right now.
Absolutely. Very
All
interesting
right,
to hear.
super. So we're going to wrap up in a minute, but is there anything else that you would like to share that perhaps I haven't asked you about or we haven't delved into about Speakology or AI conversation, AI tutoring in general?
I guess my one message that I would say is to anyone watching is we're in this really unique time period, and whether it's Speakology or whether it's any of the other AI companies that are coming out, I know just in my personal life, there's so many different AI tools, and I try, more and more each week, just because I think that we're riding this really unique roller coaster right now.
Right.
So I encourage anyone that's watching, I think dive in head over heels. I think AI is never perfect right now. I think at some point we will reach a period where it becomes more perfect, but it is just such an exciting time. So I really do appreciate you having me, Tom.
Well, thanks, Ben. Hey, Ben, how could someone reach out to you? I can just say from my interaction, you've been so helpful, you've been so personable, and genuinely interested in how AI can help teachers and students. So I'd encourage people to reach out to you. What's the best way of contacting you?
Yes, you can reach me at ben@speakology.ai. And if you go to our website, it's speakology.ai, and we have a little contact form there too. You can talk to our team.
Super. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking time out to speak with me. This has been of great benefit, I believe, to schools, to universities, teachers, instructors, and I know me personally, I've gained a lot from meeting you and learning about Speakology and practicing my Italian with it. So keep up the good work, right? Keep it up.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
Yeah, thank you.
much.
I'm a huge fan of your whole site and of your newsletter, so I appreciate you having me, Tom. I really do.
Very, very kind of you. I hopefully we're going to do this again and talk about some exciting new developments at Speakology.
Love.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you so much.